You made a good point about, for locals, buy locals. Also trying to minimize consumption or only use what you need. While it, of course, is a fantastic idea, uh, the implementation of it, right? How do you like? How do you feel like? What are the challenges there? And do you really feel it is something that is uh, achievable, right? Because at the end of the day, yes, of course, the whole discussion of GDP and things tends to get blown out of proportion, and there is no check and balance, as we say. So from that perspective, what do you think the approach should be?
Well, Harsh, as I said, first of all, it's very important to follow some fundamentals, right? And what I told, these are the fundamental laws of human existence. If we violate, we are not going to exist for very long time. And that long time is not centuries after, right? I'm not talking about 500 years later, 1,000 years later. We are talking about 60 years from now, 80 years from now, 100 years from now. So that long time is not really far away from now, and we are seeing every sign of it. And therefore, if the question is it possible to adopt and implement it? Answer is, if you don't want to adopt and you want to disappear from the planet, I am fine with it. You know. So when it comes to survival, Harsh, people will do everything possible. I hope that the sense prevails and we do it in time. But if it comes to the existence and survival, look at any living species. You try to kill them and they will come up, and you try to cut a tree and they will come up again. So everybody wants to live and survive.
Right.
So I'm sure once people will realize that it is the question of my survival, then people will change. Only thing is, I hope that will not be too late and should not be far too late.
Absolutely, you make a good point that we are, even I think the current situation is a good example of how we figure out a way to survive. Uh, Although, slightly maybe to play devil's advocate for a second, um, the implementation of it at a personal level, at a local level, a lot of things tend to work at policy level, right? In the sense that by the time is a single individual takes up this responsibility, has responsibilities, to the family, etc., etc. Usually, all these changes tend to trickle down at a policy level, at somebody up there running the government who's trying to implement this. So, from that perspective, don't you like? Do you feel that that is a much easier way of trying to get it, uh, you know, have the masses adopt something like that instead of
Well,
having start at a local level?
well, I believe and I strongly believe, right? Just not because I feel so, but last year I traveled around the world. I visited about 30 countries in one stretch, and before that, so what I have seen, this is after the Paris Agreement was signed and everything. What I've seen is invariably every government all over the world, irrespective whether the developing countries or developed countries, uh, are only moving in one direction, that is economic growth. And as you said, if I ask question how much economic growth is required, nobody knows the answer. At what rate we should be growing, nobody knows the answer. How long should we be growing, nobody knows the answer. It is like, we are just shooting in the dark. Yes, we need to grow. Why and how much and how long, nobody knows. So therefore, I believe that it is whatever governments are doing, it is never going to be sufficient for mitigating climate change. For the one simple reason, for two simple reasons. One, the governments are always elected for a very short time, 4 to 5 years. And for the history of the planet, 4 to 5 years is nothing. Second thing, governments are always going to have a limited resources. They cannot put n number of amount of money for one particular thing. And therefore, if you wait for government policies which are too slow, if you wait for subsidies which are not enough, if you wait for government to take an action, I personally believe that it will be far too late. And because you and I and every individual has contributed to this change, and therefore, you and I, it is our responsibility to make a solution also. Not for the government, not for the society, not for any social work, but just for your own children. Forget about everybody else. Do you want your children to breathe a clean air? Do you want your children to drink clean water? Do you want your children to eat healthy food? Only for that purpose, ensure that we do not become the part of the pollution. but become the part of solution. And when it comes to doing things for your own children, you do not need government, you do not need policy. And that is why that is how I believe that this time, the humans, the modern humans on this planet, at least last 100 years, we have been making every judgment, every decision based on the economics. At least now, I hope people will rise above and will not take a decision just on the economics. Because if you are going to work with the economic reasoning, we are definitely going to be doomed. We have to go beyond. I want my children to breathe clean air, which I have been breathing last 40 years. I want my children to go and swim in any river they choose to, which is not possible. Even Ganga and Ganga Maya, Narmada Maya, the mother, we worship them. We can't go and drink a glass of water. So that's a terrible stupidity of the modern human. And if you still apply the economic reasoning, I think there is no answer to that. And the government policies and all will not be enough and will not be sufficient.
No, you make, of course, that is the prime question at the end of the day, where your health of your family matters the most. Uh, again, this can be a lengthy topic of discussion itself, because I personally believe that at the end of the day, it has to be a mixture of policy and public awareness, in the sense that economic disparity is what causes the ones in the lower domain, I mean, lower, not as economically stable, to pursue the economic dream, right? I think that's the dream comes from the government, and how society has put it as progress.